Hi everyone, it's Kim. Thanks for joining me. This week I wanted to challenge myself to use some of my most favorite die sets that came out this year and get them ready for the upcoming October 31st holiday. And we're going to start with Mickey and Minnie out of the Steamboat Willie duo from Spellbinders. And let's get these guys ready for Halloween. Obviously, they're going to be more whimsical than they are scary, but I had a great time playing with the two characters. So we'll start off with Mickey here. He's out trick or treating, looking back at the haunted house and that great big full moon. So we've got Mickey. He was easy enough to change up a little bit, add some different color clothing. That's primarily what I did with him as far as clothing. His shirt and his sleeves, there are not separate dies for that, but it's easy enough just to cut the die out, like for the sleeves, and then trim off the hands. So the sleeves are colored, and same thing for his shirt. I just cut that out of his body part, trimmed it down, and attached it to his main black base body. The shorts are a separate die set as well as the shoes. So that was easy enough to do. Then it was time to decorate. And I went back and I went through all my Halloween dies. I pulled out some current ones and I also used some from the past. So a lot of times for Halloween, we have the same pieces over and over, just a little different style. So let's start with the haunted house. We've looked at a number of haunted house dies. Any of those would work. But I was going through my memory box dies looking for something in particular, and I came across the old haunted house, and I thought, you know what, that's perfect to use with Mickey. It's more in the background, so I pulled this out, and that's what I used for Mickey. And then that moon, I'm sure you know where that came from. Tim Holtz's die. This is called Moonlight, and this is the large moon in the die set. So filled out perfectly behind the haunted house. And then a couple other little pieces to decorate Mickey. His candy is from a retired die set from Tim, mini Halloween things. But this one has a lot of great small little pieces on it that I could use for a number of my cards. And then finally, his little pumpkin basket here is from Spellbinders 13 Days of Craftoween. So let's find out where that little basket's from, and it's from day 9 with the one-eyed monster and the one-eyed basket. So perfect for Mickey to carry that. Again, we've looked at a number of baskets that you could use for that. Same thing for candy. I'm sure you have something in your stash that you could use for candy. So loved working on this. And then it was time for Minnie. So on this mini card, I didn't really use traditional Halloween colors. The orange is traditional, but the blue maybe not so much. But I still like the look of this. The paper is from 49 and Market, their Rust and Revs 2.0 collection. So I kind of just took my cue from the paper and cut out the pieces accordingly. Still have plenty of orange in there. So this time we've got Minnie. And I did the same thing as I did with Mickey. You can't really see her dress and her sleeves, but I did the same thing. The skirt I could cut out because it's a separate piece, but like the shirt part and the arms are different. In this one, and I know you can't really see it, I just cut her body part out again and made basically a dress. And then she does have her bloomers under there, which are kind of covered up, and the shoes are a separate piece. The other thing that I did do is I flipped the head. So my heads are looking like over their shoulder. So when I made these two, here's Mickey. He's looking over his shoulder. So is Minnie, even though on the die set, they're looking like straight forward to where their body position is. So I like to mix that up with the heads. Then to decorate her, the circles around it, there is a frame set that goes with this, but I decided I use those dies, but I could just use 2 nesting circle dies. I needed a base to hold this book. So that's kind of where I got the idea to pop her through that, but I dropped the circle a little bit. And then my book comes from, again, a retired Tim die, but if you're into Halloween, my guess is you probably have this. This is Regions Beyond. So I have the book and the quill feather pen. And then for the books and the Spellbound, that's from Craftoween again. That is from day 7. So I have my 2 books she's standing on and the Spellbound banner there. And then the Happy Halloween, that is a new die set we haven't looked at yet. That is from Hero Arts. And this is just called Happy Halloween. So this does have a background or shadow die behind it here. I just used the letters, and then Happy I did put on the banner that's behind it. And it does have a couple of bats, which I did not use this time. So fun to play with Minnie. Again, a little different look. I am going to point out her scarf here. So I just am going to point that out because we're going to look at where that came from here in just a minute, because I did this on a couple dies where I'm like, ooh, I need this piece, but how do I get that? Okay, let's take another look at Minnie. Well, we've got her out, and this time she's dressed with more like a witch. Here is where you can see I just cut out her body again and made a dress. And then I did the same thing with the sleeves. I cut them out on the arm piece and then just trimmed out her hands. You can see her bloomers, and the shoes are separate. Then I just went looking for a witch hat wherever I could find one. Again, so many different choices out there. The one I decided on was this one here. This is from Frightful Things. So that was a perfect size for her. And before I forget, I'm going to go back and talk about her little scarf or shawl, whatever you want to call that. For whatever reason, after I pulled the hat out, I saw this little piece and I thought, oh, I could use that. So I cut that out. I did have to cut it in half and trim down the backside so that just the little corners would fit out. But I show you that because there's a couple other things that I've done here where I've had to find something and I just pull out a piece and modify it to make it work. But we've got her hat, and then for her crystal ball here, let's go back to this set. This is Regions Beyond, and I just cut this out for her crystal ball, and I did make it a little shaker, put some stars and some glitter in there. And then her little wand there is just a little sliver of paper that I cut out and it colored. And then finally for Best Witches, that is from that letterpress plate from Hero Arts, and this is called Spooky Season. So Best Witches. I thought that was perfect for this mini card. And then let's just look at one more Mickey card here. I had to kind of try to make a scary Mickey. So we've got a vampire Mickey. And I had fun with this one. This time I needed 2 things to complete Mickey. First, if I'm going to make him a vampire, I needed some teeth. And this is hardly a scary vampire, but I was like, where am I going to make some teeth? And I could think of a couple dies, but the fangs were too big. So to make his fangs, I simply cut out a star and then just cut off the tip of the star, and those were perfect fangs. So if you're ever in desperate need for a fang, cut out a star and then just cut off each tip and you've got some perfect fangs. The other thing I needed for him was a cape. And I thought, well, what am I going to use for a cape? And I thought of a couple things. What I went back to first was this piece. This is actually a ghost, and I'm going to lay this on top so you could see if this was behind him, how that would, that could work. You could change the position of it. So here's the ghost I used, and I thought that works, except it's a little small since it's behind him and most of it would be hidden. What else could I use? So I had this die set out, and these are a little bigger than what's shown on the packaging. I used the base of this pumpkin, and that is his cape. So you can kind of see the curved edges on the bottom. That's the curved edges of the pumpkin. So that was a little wider, and it looked like a cape. And then the collar is actually from one of, I think it was from Minnie's hat here. I think I had this piece die cut out. So I flipped it around, and that's the collar that's sort of sticking out there on the edge. So again, even though this wasn't designed as a cape, it gives the illusion of a cape. And then the frame is a web frame. I don't even have the original packaging, but that's from Memory Box. And then those bats are from the Moonlight die set because I have such a great assortment. So again, even though Mickey is a vampire, he's not a very scary vampire. It's more fun. Okay, so then I thought I better put Mickey and Minnie up and pull another set out. So this time I pulled out Winnie the Pooh. I love this. I think it's heartwarming is my feeling when Winnie is taking Piglet around to go trick or treating. So Pooh and Piglet come from the Pooh and Piglet set from Spellbinders. And again, what I like is we can they can sit, they can be walking, we can position those arms and legs. So for Pooh, I just made he dressed up like a pumpkin. I cut his body out again and then just trimmed off his head for his body part. And then I did find a pumpkin. I went through my pumpkin stash to find one that I could just die cut the top of the pumpkin and put it on as a hat. You could cut that piece. And then I just went through some leaves to find some leaves to decorate that with as well. For Piglet here, he is a vampire. So let's start off with his fangs. I did the same thing I did with Mickey, except I just cut down a little closer or scooted up the fang a little bit. So you have just the very tip of the star for his fangs. I did the same thing as far as covering his legs and his arms and his bodies, just die cut out of black and trimmed off for the hands and the feet. This piece is another little piece I had floating around. And I'm not sure if that was probably a collar that I used from someplace, probably from a hat, and then just stuck that on as his cape. For Pooh's little pumpkin basket, that's from the Boo Crew. That was just a good size from Spellbinders, so I used that. Then for Piglet's little candy collecting bucket there, that is from 13 Days of Craftoween, and that's from day 6, the little cauldron from the skeleton. So perfect size for Piglet to hang on to. And I love his little mask here. That is from a retired die. This is Masquerade, and I just knew someday I'd have a great purpose for those little bitty Masquerade masks. So that's what Piglet has on. And then there's that haunted house again, the same one from Memory Box that we used for Mickey. I just placed it a little differently on the card. So you can see how I used the whole die set there. And this time I just used more of the right hand die set, and Pooh is covering up the left hand. And just the paper difference. This is a piece of the 49 and Market paper, a scrap. So I love how that looks. And finally, Trick or Treat. Again, there's several Trick or Treat sets out there that I could have picked from, but I picked the Photo Play one just because it was a little smaller, and I just like that font since all of the attention is on Winnie and Piglet. So love this card. Again, to me, it's just a fun, whimsical card. And finally, one last one that just kind of popped in my mind at the last minute is Piglet out in the moon. Now, this moon is a die that when I was at my parents' again, I was going through my mom's stuff, and she had this die set from Doris Crafts. And I was like, I think I have that. So when I went home, sure enough, I do. Back in the day of Tuesday morning, that's where I got this. And missed Tuesday morning, but I can still use their dies even though the company is gone. So when you cut this out, though, and there's a little opening there, you can draw on the eyes and the mouth and the nose. It actually comes up facing, the face is facing left. And I really didn't want a left-facing moon for Piglet. I wanted everything to be going the same direction. So then I thought, okay, I'll cut it out and I'll just trim out the mouth and the nose, and then I could, use it like this. But to me, part of this is the face. So I cut it out. This is actually the back side of the die cut, and my cutting pads have had a lot of love. So whenever I cut something out, a lot of times I get these little wrinkles, and I knew that was going to happen on this, but I thought I'm going to use that in my favor and just go for it. So the wrinkles are from my cutting pad, but I don't think it really matters. And then I could just flip this, put this on the back side and color in those eyes, nose, and mouth, and have the moon going in the direction I want. So again, I guess all of that is to say, if you have something and you need to change it up, you can find a way to make it work. So we have a very friendly looking moon, keeping an eye out for little Piglet here. I have no idea what Piglet dressed up to be, and it really doesn't matter. This is a piece from another die set. I don't think it's from the Piglet die set. I couldn't even tell you, but that's just a little die piece to something. I thought, oh, that makes a good hat. And then his little pumpkin basket this time is from the 13 Days of Halloween. And let me find that one real quick. It's from the ghost, so that's day 4. So that little ghost, and I just cut off the stem and pull the handle from this guy here and just pulled it down on the pumpkin so it would fit his body size a little better. So this one was super simple, but again, I think it's just a sweet, whimsical, non-scary Halloween card. So when I finished with Pooh and Mickey and Minnie, I thought, all right, what would be really fun? It would be great to make a set of Halloween playing cards. Now, I didn't make a whole set, but I do want to show you the face cards that I didn't come up with. So the first thing I did was, well, actually the second thing, but let me show you first the deluxe deck Better Press Plate. Quickly could color and make different backgrounds for the backside of the card. And so let's look at these. We're going to start with the Queen. And the Queen this time is the Witch, but I wanted to use this dice set, the Reversible Royal Court, as kind of the base for all of my cards. And you'll see how I've used this in different ways. So for the Witch, I basically used everything that's in this dice set and then added the witch hat. And again, I could pick any witch hat that I wanted. This is the one I took for her many Halloween things, but I could have just as easily picked this one. Whatever witch hat you have would work. But all the other pieces come in this set. I did not do the double face. I just did one because they're so tall. And I just added a little piece on all of my figures just to kind of square off the bottom. But I had fun just playing with the different papers that I had. And then my font for all of them is from a vault set from Tim. This is called Vault Coffin Box. This is from last year's release. So that just was perfect for my witch card rather than the Queen. And to be able to use the Reversible Royal Court in a little different way. So then, let's look at the King. The King is now the Count. And I used his body, everything from his body down is from this set. But I knew this hairline was going to be different than the hairline in this die set. So I was like, oh, what am I going to do for his head? So I substituted the King's head for the Count's head. This Count is from Craftoween. So I just made the head, and I did have to cut it off from his body here, which is fine, and mounted it onto the base head is from this set. So I'd have his neck, but just mounted that on and decorated it accordingly. He already has his fangs, so I didn't have to resort to a star. And there's the C for Count. So I've got 2 of them down. And so now I needed my Jack, and I wanted a skeleton head. I have the perfect skeleton, but he's MIA right now. So I had to come up with another character. and I came across Frankenstein when I was digging through my dies. So here's Spellbinder's Let's Be Frank. He's got a big head, but he still worked. And I know he looks like the biggest character of all, but when I line him up with the witch, he's about the same height, even though his head is kind of oversized, but it still worked with the body. So I did basically the same thing that I've done with all of them. And then I put a bone in his hand because I didn't really want to put a knife or anything. So I thought a bone would work. Now, if you don't have this Frank, here's another one I had that I could have used from Sizzix. He would have worked just as well. His head isn't as big, but it would still have worked. This is called, let's see, Spooky Friends. So that Frank head would work, and you might have a totally different Frankenstein head. Whatever characters you have would work. But I really had a great time making these guys, and then I used the F out of that set. So I at least have my face cards made for my new deck of cards. And that was utilizing a set that I already had, which really made making the bodies and the clothing go by really fast. They're a little more scary than my other little Winnie the Pooh cards and my Mickey cards and my Minnie cards. But again, take a look at some of the dies you have that you've used all year. And if you're into Halloween, how can you change those up? They don't necessarily have to be scary, as we've learned. They just have to be fun. So thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you again in a future video.